Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Programming in Access 2013. My name is Steve Bishop. Today we're going to be continuing our series on VBA, or Visual Basic for Applications. Today's topic is going to be events. Now, events are special triggers that modules can look for. Okay, so they're little triggers that are going to happen, and modules can be looking for those triggers. And with events, you've got a publisher and a subscriber. And these are two separate classes from each other. You've got one class that's going to be the publisher and one class that is going to be the subscriber. Now, the publisher creates the event and raises it. So the publisher is going to go out and declare what an event is, and it's also going to be the one that decides when to raise that event. The subscriber is going to watch for the event to be raised and then perform an action when it's raised. So this is the link between the two. You've got one that is the publisher who's going to create and raise an event and trigger an event, while the subscriber is going to be watching for when that event is triggered and then do something when that event is triggered. So in your publisher, the syntax is going to be looking like this, where we have public event with an event name and then any parameters that you want to declare on your event. So this is going to be declared in your publisher. And this public event name with any parameters is the declaration of that event. Okay, you're creating an event. You can think of it kind of like a property on your class. Okay, you're declaring it here. Then you have somewhere in your code, somewhere in your publisher's code, you've got a method that you've already written out here, and it's doing something. And then when you want to trigger that event, when you want to trigger this event that you named originally, that you created, you're going to use the raise event keyword along with the name of the event you want to raise and any arguments that are required to raise that event. Then of course you're going to end that subroutine. Then in the subscriber, so that's this class that's listening for events. In order to make it so that your subscriber is listening to the events, is when you declare your object name of the class that holds the events in it, you need to use the with events keyword. And then later on in your code, you're going to have this private sub object name, whatever the name of the object was that you declared up above, with an underscore and then the name of the event that you want it to watch for. Okay? So you're up above, you're declaring your event with events. Okay, you're going to use the with events keyword with the object name and then as whatever the class name was, and the class name is the class that contains the event in it. Then you're going to do this private sub with the object name that you declared up above in your subscriber underscore and then the event name that you declared within the class that has the event. Then you're going to do something when that event is raised. And then you're going to, of course, end your subroutine. So you can see the relationship here between the two. Okay? It's really important that you understand. One has an event that is just up, you're just posting it. You're saying, hello, go ahead and if anybody's listening, go do whatever it is you want to do because now's the time. And then on the other side, in your subscriber, you actually have something that is listening and going to do an action whenever that particular event is raised. Now, there are certain rules for events that you need to be aware of. Events must be declared in the declarations section of your class, which means you can't declare an event anywhere other than at the top of your class. Okay, you can't declare it at the bottom. You need to declare it all the way up at the top, before any of your subroutines or functions, methods, any of that. And I even go all the way up above any properties that I create too. So it needs to be all the way up at the top of your class. You cannot create circular publisher and subscribers, which means you can't make it so that a publisher is both a publisher and a subscriber to the same class as your subscriber. Okay, you can't have this back and forth between the two different objects. It's a one direction thing. Okay, and that's because Microsoft doesn't want you to create an accidental infinite loop where one event is raised in your publisher class which then your subscriber is listening to. So it goes and does some action, and when it's done doing that action, it goes and raises its own event that the publisher then is now listening to, and then it goes and does something again. It doesn't. Microsoft doesn't want you to be able to do it back and forth like that. You can only do it one directionally. Okay. Now there are certain ways to get around that. You could actually create a third class if you wanted to, but that's a little bit more difficult than what we really need to get into. And you'll find that it really is kind of unnecessary to do anything like that. You really just want a publisher and a subscriber one directionally. Now events must be declared with the public access modifier. And if you think about it, this kind of makes sense. You want your event to be public so that anybody watching can listen for that public event. If it was a private event, it really wouldn't make much sense because then no one would be able to see it. The optional parameters are not allowed. So the optional keyword in your parameters of your event are not allowed. You cannot use optional for those parameters. If you declare a parameter within an event, then any time that you are raising that event, you must pass in the required parameter. Named arguments are also not allowed to be passed, and we haven't really talked about named arguments, but there is a way basically to pass your values into a function or into an event where you actually name what is the parameter that you're trying to ascribe that particular value to. So you don't have to necessarily do it in order of how they show up as the list of parameters. You can kind of get your different values at different times. Well, unfortunately with events, that's not allowed. You cannot name your arguments, okay? You have to go in the order in which they appear in the list of parameters. And that's not really something we're going to get all into. I'm not really going to discuss named arguments anywhere in this course, but you're welcome to go ahead and investigate those things. We may use an instance where we use named arguments, and that might be a good example to see how they're used, but like I said, I'm not really going to cover them too much in this course. Now, the publishing object must be instantiated using the set keyword. Okay, and up above in the line that's yellow, you can kind of see how we've got this dim with events new object as new class name. And that's how we've been declaring our objects lately, except without the with events keyword. We've just been dimming new object as new class name. Well, you can't just use the with events inside of that declaration. You'll notice below in the white I have dim with events new object as class name. So we're dropping the new keyword when we're declaring our class name. And then after we've dimmed our class, we can then somewhere in our code use the set keyword in order to set the object into a new instance of the class. Okay, and that's what you have to do. If you're going to use the with events keyword, you cannot use the new keyword with your declaration of that object. And then when you're going to instantiate that object, you have to use the set keyword in order to use the new keyword to create that instance of your class name. Now, events can only be created in class modules. They cannot be created in regular modules. And I know we haven't really gone over the distinction between class modules and regular modules yet, but a class module is what we've been working on in the last couple of videos, okay? They're objects that have properties and methods in them. And you can create also events in them, but you can't create events on regular modules like the globals module that we worked on some time back in earlier videos, okay? Now, regular modules can, however, be subscribers. Okay, you can't declare an event, you can't create an event in a regular module, but you can listen for events in regular modules. All right, so those are some of the rules that you need to be aware of when you are working with events. Now let's go ahead and see an example of this. Let's go ahead and see how this all works out. So I'm back to where I was before, and there's my dimming of a new contact as new class contact, which back over here is where we developed our class object before. And remember, we've got our init function, our init method here that we need to run when we instantiate our object, when we create our object here. So what we've got to do, and what I want to do, is I want to make it so that when this init function both starts and ends, it's going to declare, it's going to pop up a message to the user. Now, I could just simply go in here and I could say message box contact class initializing. There we go, if I could spell correctly. And then drop another message box down here that says contact class initialized. Okay, so I could do that, and we could certainly run it this way so that, you know, when the init method is run, then we pop up a message box, do our thing, and then pop up another message box. But we're doing all of that within this code. Let's say that this is just kind of a theoretical example here. Let's say that we want this message box to pop up not from within this code, but we actually want the caller, whoever the object was here, this form underscore form, we want it to be the one that responds and pops up the message box for whatever reason. Okay, this is just an example. We will be going more into in-depth reasons why you want to do events, but this is just to kind of show you how the workflow works here. So rather than set up my message inside of my init method here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create an event on my class contact. Now, my contact class is in fact where it is going to be the publisher. Okay, it's the one that's going to send up a flag for anybody that's listening that an event is being triggered. So we're going to use public keyword as the access modifier, public event, and show message. Now I'm also going to add a parameter in here because I'm going to pass in some text to whoever is listening to this event. I'm going to pass them some text, and I'm going to call that variable, that parameter, a message, and it's going to be of a type of string. Okay, so we've got a public method called show message, and we're going to pass in message as a string. And again, I don't need to pass in variables if I don't want to, but in this particular case, I'm going to create one, and I will be passing information through it. Okay, so now, in my init, instead of doing my message box right here and there, I'm going to do raise event show message. And you can see when I put a space right after the raise event keyword, it automatically, IntelliSense, knew that I was going to raise one of the events that I created already in the class object here. And sure enough, show message is the one I want. So let's go ahead and tab in order to make that the one. And then I need to make sure that in parentheses, I am passing along that argument. Okay, so here I'm raising the event, show message, and then the contact class initializing. Okay, then down here I'm basically going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this, and down here I'm going to raise the same event with a different message. Okay, so I'm going to trigger the event show message at this point when the init method has been started to run, when it's been initialized, and I'm going to raise that event that shows a message contact class initializing, and then raise event show message class contact initialized. Now, here's one of the key things that you need to understand about events. At this particular point, nothing is really happening. Okay, I may be raising an event, but unless there's somebody listening to the event, nothing is really going to happen. Okay, I may raise the event, pop in a message that goes into here into my show message event, but unless somebody's listening, the application is really going to stop right there. And what's great about that is that I don't necessarily, I can put one of these events in here, but I don't have to have anybody do anything because of it. Okay, I can or I don't have to. I could have someone subscribe to this event, or I could just leave it the way it is and no one will be the wiser. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, so if I save it and I compile it, you'll notice I don't get any sort of errors. Everything works completely, perfectly fine. Okay, so I created this event called show message, and here it is up here. I've got one parameter that I'm going to pass along to anybody who's listening. So let's go back to our form here where we declared an object called new contact of a type of that class. Remember, class contact is the publisher here. Okay, so the form, I want to make this form underscore form the subscriber to that particular class, okay, to that particular event. And the way that we need to do that is when we declared the object here as a type of that class, this is where we would need to use the with events keyword. But remember, I declared it with this new keyword. So if I try to go out of it here, I'm going to get an error message. It says invalid use of new keyword. Because again, I can't use the new keyword if I'm also using the with events. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that new keyword there. And now when I move off, you'll see that it lets me go ahead and do that. Now that's all fine and good, but now I've got this object that is that Access knows now. I want to be watching out for any events that occur from this object called new contact. So this new contact, it may be raising some sort of event, and I'm alerting Access with this with events keyword that, hey, I'm looking for events that are going to be happening on this object, okay? And whenever something like that happens, I want to do something. Now, I have a couple of problems here. Number one, this dim with events is declared inside of my form load, which means no other part of my form underscore form module here is able to see this new contact object. Okay, because I declared it inside of the form load, the only place that is going to be able to see that object, that new contacts object, is inside of the form load event. So I can't see the new contact out here. So if I wanted to create another private sub, and I'm just going to call it whatever. Okay, and then I wanted to use that new contact, and I hit period. Notice I don't get any of the IntelliSense for that new contact object, and that's because this object only exists for the brief moment that we are running this form load method, that form load subroutine. So once I hit this end sub, then this new contact object goes away. It disappears. Okay, Access goes in, cleans up the memory, and it's gone, and I can't access it anymore. So what we need to do is we need to move this. I'm going to go ahead and delete this out of here first. I need to move this new contact object out of the form load event, and I'm going to put it up here in my declarations. So now it is an object variable that is visible to all of the rest of my code. Now what I can do is, well, first I need to go ahead and set my object. I need to instantiate it here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that by using that set keyword, new contact equals new CLS contact. Okay? So now I'm dimming it as an object variable up here in my declaration section, but here is where I'm actually going to instantiate it, and that is on the form load event. All right? So there's my instantiating statement, and this is very important to understand that you must use this syntax. You know, you got your declaration here, and then you need to instantiate it with the new keyword somewhere else in your code. All right. Now that I've got that done, I could go in here and I could start manually typing private sub, and if you recall, I'm going to go back to the slide here. You'll see that we had the private sub object name underscore event name. So I could go through here and I could do this. So the object name is new contact underscore, and the event name was show message. And then there was a variable called message as string. Okay, and I could certainly do it that way. That's fine. But believe it or not, there's a quick, easy shortcut here. once you get to this particular point, and this is also a good way of validating to make sure that you've done everything right up to this point, if I go up here to where we have these two drop downs, you may not have noticed these before. We haven't really done anything with them, but I can actually select objects and events on my class right here. So let's say I want to go ahead and create that new subroutine. You'll notice that new contact is an object that I have that is accessible, so I can click it. And it knows, since I only have the one event that's in that class object, it automatically just goes, okay, well, that must be the event that you want to be listening for. And sure enough, it creates our private sub new contact underscore show message as string. So it does that association for us. And this is a really good way to make sure you've done everything correctly up to this point, because let's just say, for example, I'm going to take this out here just for a moment. And let's say I forgot to do the with events keyword here. Well, watch this. Notice it's disappeared. Even though my object still exists up here in my declarations, I don't have it from my drop-down list. But when I use the with events keyword, now it'll show up. Okay, so then I select it, and it automatically selects the show message event. If I had multiple events on here, I would still need to select which event I want to work with from this list. And then from there, I just go into here into my subroutine, and now this is where I'm going to actually do something. This is where I'm going to pop up that message box that displays the message. So that's it. That's all I've got to do. I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint here, and we'll follow along. We'll follow the flow of how this all works, how this publisher and subscriber really does its thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and start my form. Oh, come on, you're being a pain, aren't you? There we go. All right, so there, I've just loaded my form, and the new contact object exists, but there's nothing in it right now. Okay, it hasn't been instantiated. So I've got this object up there that's ready to go. Now we're going to go ahead and use that set keyword to go ahead and instantiate our object as a new class contact. And now we're going to run that init method from our new contact. And that jumps us over into the class contact, this class module over here. And we're going to run that init method. And now the first thing that happens, the first thing that the init method does is raise that event show message called with the message of contact class initializing. So what's going to happen is it's just going to jump straight to anyone who is listening for that show message event. And sure enough, back here on my form underscore form, we've got that new contact underscore show message subroutine, who is the subscribed method that's going to run when that event is raised. So here we go. Message box, and we're going to get contact class initializing because that was the message we passed in. All right. Then when I continue on through the code, we'll jump from the form underscore form back to the class contact because that was where we were running the init method. And so now it's going to do its normal thing of setting the values, setting the properties that we were working with before in this class. And then it's going to raise the same event, the show message event, but it's going to pass in a slightly different value for the message text. But it's going to jump again to this form underscore form subroutine called new contact underscore show message. And it's going to run the same method. It's going to run the same subroutine again from this form underscore form because we're raising the same event. But this time the message is a little different. Contact class initialized. So it's done. And we're good. Then we're going to go ahead and skip on down to the next line. And sure enough, that is the end of the init method. So we're at the end sub of that particular init method. And that brings us back now to the end. We're done now with that init method. So we're going to jump back to on the form_form where the debug print is going to occur, and that's going to go get a couple of values off of my class and post them down here to the immediate window. So you can see how that works. You can see how there's this connection now between this form_form who's listening for events and listening for this specific event show message from the object new contact that was created inside of it here. And then whenever something happened in this class that raised that event show message, then whoever was listening to that event show message went ahead and did its subroutine down here, its action when that event was raised. And that is how you have the connection between the two different class objects. Now, if you think about it, we've actually already done something similar to this, but we've just never gone over it. And it was done automatically in the background by access. Notice that private sub form load. Well, this is the same exact thing as what we're doing here. Private sub new contact show message. We have an object name with an underscore and then event, and that correlates to the events that we have over here on our form. There's the onLoad event. So notice we have an event procedure. You can even say it says event procedure right here, and this was the code that we designed around the form load event. Okay, so we've already worked with events, but they've just automatically been created. The syntax was already done for us by access when we clicked on those buttons. Now we're declaring our own particular custom events, and then we're doing whatever we want with them whenever we want, which is really, really cool. That's great about coding, is you get to make the code do what you want when you want it to do it. All right, we're going to get a little bit more in depth into some of the things that you will be using these events for, and I hope to see you in that next video.